Welcome to Southern Sense Talk Radio with your host, the radio chick, Annie Ubelis. Join Annie on Tuesdays and Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time with an open chat room full of her regulars. And yes, you can even call in. Call 917-889-3675. That's 917-889-3675 to be a part of the action on the phone line. Not able to listen live? Not a problem. You can always catch Annie, the radio chick, and Southern Sense Talk Radio podcast in archives at southern-sense.com. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Southern Sense the right way.
Oh, we're back. Welcome to Southern Sense here on Blog Talk Radio, High Plains Media, SHR Media, Kinetic Hi-Fi, The Fix FM out of Charleston, South Carolina, up on iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker. Oh, the heck with it. Just go to our website, which is the name of the show, put a dash in the middle, southern-sense.com. I'm your hostess with the mostest, the radio chick, Annie. And welcoming back my co-host, the ever so handsome and adorable co-host Curtis C.S. Bennett. Good afternoon, Curtis, and welcome home.
Hey, it's good to be back, Andy, and I would like to take this time out to thank everyone for their prayers and well wishes for my mother, who had a stroke about 2 weeks ago, and she's doing fine. She should have a complete recovery, and it just goes to show that if you have hypertension, you need to stay on top of that stuff because they call high blood pressure the silent killer for a reason. So keeping that in mind, stay healthy. It's good to be back. And I want to thank Kel for filling in for me.
We love Kel. Kel is adorable, and she did a fantastic job filling in for you, Curtis, and we thank her very much from the bottom of our heart, and all the other listeners out there that gave Kel, me, and you and your family such love and support. We've got we really do have a unique family here on Blog Talk Radio, especially those of us that are conservative radio hosts. We kind of stick side by side with everyone. If one person is hurting, we all hurt for that person. And it showed just on this one humble show. It showed how much the people out there really love and care. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing. And also, I wanted to mention, because your mother did recuperate at a very, very great pace, which means it's telling me that she got to the hospital very, very quickly. Because with someone that has a stroke, whether it be a major stroke or a mini stroke like I had, if you get the person to the hospital within the first hour, they have such a better chance of survival and total recovery. So God bless the people at that hospital. God bless the emergency services that helped your mom get there in time. Again, first responders rock.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we're back. We're back to normal as it can be here on this show. So, moving right along. We've got a couple of great guests. We've got Doug Giles from the Clash Daily. He'll be joining us at the second half of the show. And at the top of the show, we're going to have Florida Representative Mike Hill returning. Unfortunately, he lost his bid for the Florida Senate seat. But we'll talk to him to see what's in store for him and down the road. That said, those that listen to the show know we start off with a dedication to a fallen hero. And this one is very close to my heart because it's a fellow NYPD officer that was killed in the line of duty. And today's show is going to be dedicated to New York City Police Sergeant Paul Tuozzolo. His end of tour was November 2nd of 2016. And as I pull up the dedication music, this is from CBS New York. The NYPD is in mourning after 19-year veteran Sergeant Paul Tuozzolo and another sergeant was shot in the leg. Family, friends, neighbors, and police officers gathered in Huntington on Long Island, New York, where Tuozzolo lived, holding a vigil in his honor. Workers painted a blue line in the street in front of his house, and stores placed blue ribbons and candles in their windows. Suffolk County Police Commissioner Tim Sinney called Tuozzolo a hero. It's law enforcement that stands in between our communities and the criminals, and each and every day we have to do our best to support our law enforcement. The estranged wife of Michael Rosales, 35, called 911 to report that he was sitting in a red Jeep outside of her apartment on Beach Avenue in the Van Ness section of the Bronx. She told police Rosales had previously threatened to kill her. When an officer arrived, Rosales was gone. Rosales went back to the apartment armed with a gun and forced his way inside, sources said. Rosales' 29-year-old estranged wife, their 3-year-old son, and another 13-year-old child were home at the time, along with the estranged wife's 50-year-old mother, who called 911 saying Rosales had returned in his red Jeep, NYPD Commissioner James O'Neill said. The call went out over radio dispatch, and patrol units from the 43rd Precinct responded, but Rosales had fled by the time the police arrived at the apartment. Around 2:52 p.m., officers in a marked patrol car spotted the red Jeep at Noble and Bronx Rivers Avenue, about half a mile away. 4 officers approached the vehicle at 1575 Bronx River Avenue, and Rosales opened fire with a .35 caliber semi-automatic handgun. Tuozzolo, 41, was shot in the head, while 30-year-old Sergeant Emmanuel Quiu was struck in the leg. O'Neill said both were taken to Jacobi Medical Center, where Tuozzolo was pronounced dead. Quan was released from the hospital on early morning the next day. 2 officers returned fire, one of them a 25-year-old recruit who had yet to graduate from the academy and was on his 3rd day of infield training, sources told CBS 2. The officers fired as many as 20 shots. I actually thought they were fireworks, one woman said. There were a rapid succession, 8 or 9 shots, neighbor Miguel Pino said. Rosales was pronounced dead at the scene. A preliminary investigation indicated Rosales had 17 prior arrests in Suffolk County, where he was believed to be living. Tuozzolo had been with the NYPD since 1997 and was just 1 year shy of being able to retire. He was the father of 2 young boys, ages 3 and 4. The city is in mourning. The family of the NYPD is in mourning, said Mayor Bill de Blasio. The mayor pledged that the city will help the Tuozzolo family in any way possible. We told his wife, his mother, his father, that the NYPD will be with them for their family for as long as it takes. The 2 officers that returned fire... Oh, I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself. Suffolk County Police blocked off the street outside of Tuozzolo's well-kept yellow house in Huntington on Long Island, where neighbors were in shock. Danny Clark lived next door to Tuozzolo and his family for 6 years. He called the sergeant a great guy. I mean, he has 2 little kids. Nobody wants to go through this, Clark said. Those kids are going to be traumatized for the rest of their lives. It's sad, you know. Another neighbor, Fire Department New York EMT Eric Bretfield, told WCBS 880's Sophia Hill that the community is devastated. It's hard because you have to wonder how his wife with the kids. You can't even imagine what they're going to be going through, he said. Meanwhile, somber officers stood at attention outside the 43rd Precinct as a motorcade escorted the body of a fallen brother from the hospital. The president of the Patrolman Benevolence Association released a statement saying in part, "Let all of those who demonize law enforcement officers across the country look to this hero who, for 19 years, routinely demonstrated the quiet courage of a man dedicated to protecting others and who made the ultimate sacrifice in that service." That was said by Patrick Lynch. A steady stream of mourners placed flowers and candles in front of the precinct, including the members of the extended law enforcement family. We wake up every morning. You know the chance not to come home to our family, and he unfortunately is not returning home to his, said a state court officer assigned to the Bronx. I came to show my respect, said the wife of an NYPD officer. Flags were flown at half-staff across New York City and Long Island. Today's show is dedicated to Sergeant Paul Tuozzolo, who passed away on November 2nd of 2016. And we dedicate this show to all first responders out there who every day keep their oath to protect and serve. And we also dedicate it to all the brave men and women in our military, to those that have served, to those who are serving, and to those who will serve. We dedicate this song by Dave Bray, Last Call. God bless them all. Area code 850, to whom am I speaking?
This is Mike Hill.
Hi, Mike. How you doing today? Welcome back.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right. As soon as the dedication song is over, we'll bring you on live.
Okay, very good.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
That I can't be the man that she don't believe. I'll be waiting where the winter meets the fall. This is my last call. Tell my children that I love them. Oh, yeah, the daddy always loved them so. Tell them to hold the mother tight and to never let it go.
Hello, Skype caller. This is Annie, the radio chick. Who am I speaking to? Hello, Skype caller?
Yeah, this is Rez. How you doing?
Who's this?
This is Rez. How you doing?
Hi, Riz. All right, we're going to be doing our interview with the congressman, so we're not taking calls right at this point. We want to get started with him. So if you want to hang on, press 1. It'll take you off the waiting list, and then when we're ready to take calls...
Okay, then yeah, sure.
Just press 1 again.
Okay,
thanks.
Thanks a billion. Thanks a billion.
And I'll be there when they fall. This is my last call. Those who serve beside me and who held up in blue light. Stand tall, stand strong. Oh, Lord, have I. Sorry I let you go.
And that it was Dave Bray, Last Call. And you can find it over on DaveBrayUSA.com. We're back. This is Southern Sense you're listening to. I'm your hostess with the mostest, the radio chick Annie, along with my co-host Curtis C.S. Bennett. And Curtis, we've got ourselves a great show, rocking and rolling today. And let's bring along our first guest, a friend of yours and a friend of the show, Florida Representative Mike Hill. Are we ready? Are we ready, Curtis?
Yeah, hello, Annie. Hello, Curtis.
Hey, Mike.
Welcome back, Mike. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. There's a lot of exciting things happening across the nation, and unfortunately, I have to give my deepest sympathies to you for not winning the Senate race. We were all pulling for you and saying prayers, but it just was not meant to be, I guess.
Well, that's right, Annie. You know, of course, it was a disappointment, but you don't allow disappointments to turn into discouragement. Apparently, there is something else to do. Another plan, and so in the meantime, I'm just working my business. I own an insurance agency, so just working on that, and we'll see what comes available in the future. But for right now, I'm content to just be a business owner.
Well, you had done great things for Florida, and I know there's great potential for you in the future. And I know I'm going to let Curtis take the lead on this interview because he knows what's going on in Florida a lot better than I do. I like to stick to my little neighborhood here in South Carolina, but it doesn't always happen that way. So, Curtis, go ahead, have at it.
Well, I want to start off, Mike, with some observations I've made just talking to people. Last night I was talking about Trump to a lady, and she was telling me how she felt Trump was unprepared to win because he's taken so long to put his cabinet together. And I'm sitting there wondering, what is this woman talking about? You know, I mean, from everything I've heard, he's way ahead of every other president in the last 10 elections as far as putting together a cabinet. I mean, how can this be in this day and age of communications, you know, the internet, social media, television, and you still got people that are uninformed and misinformed? You know, where do we go from here? How do we reach these people?
Well, Curtis, I think what you just mentioned is a function of our mainstream media right now, who are throwing out all kinds of false narratives to try and trip up President-elect Trump. And that's one of them. To say that he's unprepared and has taken too much time to put together his cabinet is a ludicrous statement. And then you can also, from that same media, say that he's moving too fast. He needs to slow down some. We need to vet more these people who he is selecting to be on his cabinet. So it's just the attack mode that they're in. And how do we overcome that? I think the same way of how Trump won the election, through radio programs like yours and Annie's, who help get the truth out. Other talk show hosts who are helping to get out the truth. And then we have the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and all the others, where people are able to get information other than from that mainstream media.
I was also talking to a young cousin of mine while I was in Philadelphia, and we got on the subject of abortion. And even though I told her the history of Planned Parenthood and Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, and what was behind her, what motivated her to come up with that organization, and that was to kill off, the black population. She still thought it was a good idea for a woman to have a choice, to have an abortion for convenience purposes. And I'm saying to myself, it's this educational system that we have that has to be changed. We have to find some way to do it all over again. Take it and just destroy what's there and build it back up with things that praise this country and praise morality and things like that, have love of country. Because what they're teaching these children today are anti-American, platforms, and they believe in this stuff. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think the educational system needs to be revamped?
Absolutely, Curtis. And I think the quickest way to do that is with more school choice. We should not trap our children into these government-run schools and force them to have to go there for 12 years. And if you don't, you can go to jail for it. At least the parents can, if a child isn't sent to school. We have we need more school choice, and whatever venue that comes through, whether it's homeschool, charter school, through the internet, not all children learn the same, and they all shouldn't be forced into a classroom of somewhere between 17 to 25 students, maybe more in some areas, and are fed the same nonsense, the same garbage throughout. And we see the results of it. It's been a disaster. So if we have more school choice where a child can stay home, learn on the internet at their pace, be homeschooled, charter schooled, group schools where a group of parents can get together. That's much like the homeschool venue is. But when you start having choices like that, and where those parents who make those choices also do not have to support public schools, then you'll start seeing competition. And competition in any arena always brings better results, because now the public schools would have to compete for those same dollars that they are receiving or that could be going to some of the other schools, which would force them to deliver us a better product than what we're having right now. And Curtis, back to your point about the abortion issue, what we are seeing there is the obvious result of the start of the sexual revolution, which took place starting in the early 60s in the United States. And it was, of course, a tragedy that happened. But here are people demanding that they wanted to have this sexual intercourse with whomever and not have to pay the results of it. Well, of course, sexual activity, more than likely, will present with a pregnancy. And so what they wanted was not only to have the sexual revolution, but also to not have the consequences that go with it. And that's why the abortion industry has taken off in America, and it is a tragedy. It's a holocaust, to where we have had over 50 million babies murdered since the Roe v. Wade decision that was made. And it is such a tragedy that is going on, and we must stop it. We can stop it, because in the brain of one of those small children, God could have planted the genius to solve so many problems that we have now, such as cancer and fresh drinking water, and being able to provide food abundantly in areas that don't have it right now. And that's the tragedy that abortion has done. And for someone to think that it's a woman's choice to murder someone else is just simply naive and ignorant.
You know, Mike, you said something very important, and Curtis, you too, when you mentioned the abortion issue. And what our society has done, and those that are proponents for pro-choice, has desensitized the public. They now call a living human being in my body a unit. They did the same thing in Obamacare. If anyone read either versions of the legislation, whether it is in the House version or the Senate version, which married into what we are now living with, they call us units, not a person, not an individual, but constantly over and over and over again call us units. And then they make you think that thing growing in your body is that. It's a thing. It's not a human being capable of feeling pain, not individual that has a brain that is aware, they do not call it a person. And when they desensitize that, now what does it matter? It's just a piece of flesh growing inside you, just like a wart. They treat it as if it's a wart. And that is the problem we're facing. I got to say one other thing, though, Mike, before you respond. We have someone in the chat room who is familiar with you, Vito Esposito, and he said that you did a great job in Florida's House and a real champion for the small business. And he asked that he sends his thanks to you because he said that we will miss you and your leadership in the Florida House. How's that, Mike?
Well, thank you. Yes, thank you so much for saying that. That is so encouraging to hear. And who knows, perhaps I'll be back one day. I enjoyed serving the people of Florida, and we did get some good legislation passed which reduced taxes and got rid of unnecessary regulations and provided some benefits for our veterans in Florida. So I was glad to be a part of that. And the point you were making, Annie, is so true, how they try to change words, change language to desensitize us to the fact that a person is being killed, and that's called murder. They're being murdered in the womb, and in hideous ways. When you think about it, how they will literally pull a child limb from limb by limb, out of the woman's body. And what a horrific thing to do. And I'll tell you, though, there are some encouraging things we have seen coming from several states around the nation. I think it was Ohio, which sent to Governor Kasich that an abortion cannot be performed once a heartbeat has been detected. Now, right now we know that can happen as early as 18 days after conception. So they sent that bill to the governor. Hopefully he will sign it, but we're seeing signs like that going throughout our nation. And when more and more states pick up on that and are indeed declaring that that person inside that mother's womb has the same inalienable rights as everyone else, including the right to life, it's given to us by God, not by a government, and it cannot be taken away by a government, even though in this case it has been, due to a very warped decision by a Supreme Court in Roe v. Wade, has decided that that person inside that mother's womb does not have the same rights as a person outside the womb. And how ludicrous is that?
It's crazy, because here they're worried about the seals or the Delta smelt or some woodland owl or something like that. They're more concerned about the animals. The animals have more rights and more protection than the unborn child. And when we say child, it puts humanity onto that being formed by God. And when we do that, we kind of like negate the argument, but we're not using the argument. We should be. We should be asking these people that are pro-choice, but yet will side with PETA over the Delta smelt, but will not side on the part of an innocent human life.
So true. Here in Florida, Annie, on the Gulf Coast, I live in Pensacola, the sea turtles will come and nest. They'll dig their holes, they'll lay all their eggs, bury them back up, and then go back out to sea. And there are people who observe this and will mark those places where those turtle nests are. And if you were to go and so much as disturb that nest, not even destroy an egg that's in that nest, but if you were to disturb that nest, you can go to jail.
Yes, we've got that here too. We got the sea turtles here.
And if you were to destroy one of those eggs, you would go to jail and be fined for a long time. But that child inside the mother's womb is fair game to be killed. So it's like it's been flipped upside down. The encouraging thing, I believe, Annie and Curtis, is that with this election of Donald Trump, we're going to see a shift, a dramatic shift, a change in how things are being perceived nowadays. I think we're going to get rid of a lot of this, what do you call it, the political talk to
correctness.
Political correctness. I think you're going to see an end to a lot of that. You're going to see an end to this nonsense that I can make my choices my body. It's not just your body. There's another body inside you, and you don't have the choice to murder it. I think with the election of Donald Trump, we are going to see a tectonic shift in the way we begin doing things again here in America. I think we're going to see a shift to, and I'm not saying that Trump is the one who's going to bring this. I'm saying that Trump's election was a huge movement in America where we have pushed back against the radical left and say, enough of this nonsense. Let's go back to what made this nation, its foundation, great, and that's our moral fiber. That's fidelity to the Constitution, the rule of law. Let's go back to that because we know that works. And for about 50 years now, we have tried this leftist liberal agenda, and it has been an utter disaster.
Yeah, I think that's the truth. The silent majority finally found their voices and raised it up in unison on November 8th. And I feel a shift. Because when I talk to people, there is a buoyancy that did not exist here a year ago. Go ahead, Curtis.
Yeah, I want to get back to the terminology that you said the liberals use about fetuses and stuff in units. The left has always been good at changing the lexicon that they use to forward and advance their agenda. Say, for instance, like illegal aliens, what they say now undocumented, the Affordable Care Act. Oh, that's anything but affordable. And they play on people's emotions, and as we all know, most of us, the left is good at that, where conservatives and other Republicans are more cerebral in their approach to life. The left has been able to tap into the emotions of those on the left who fall for the agenda and propaganda of the left. And I think we, as conservatives, have got to find a way to reach those type of people on an emotional level, And I can think of no better story to present to them than the fact that this was the party of Abraham Lincoln and the party that liberated blacks from slavery. I think that needs to be out there more. What do you think?
Curtis, I try to make that point every time I speak publicly, that the reason for the founding of the Republican Party was to end slavery. And it took off. Shortly after their founding, the Republican Party, they had Abraham Lincoln elected as president. That was a huge movement in America at the time because, as we know, a great and tragic war was fought, the Civil War, and Abraham Lincoln being elected, then with the Republican Party's approval, of course, proclaimed that slaves were free. So that was huge in the United States, a huge movement, a huge shift. And I think, again, that's what we're going to see here in America is another huge movement, a shift. I'm not quite sure what it's going to entail, but I believe it's going to be good. And as you said, Annie, that there is an optimism that is out there now that we did not have for the past 8 years. It is very optimistic. People, and we're seeing it everywhere with businesses who have decided that they're going to come back to America, bring their jobs back here. And when we see these huge cuts that the Trump administration has declared they're going to make, these huge cuts in corporate tax rate and getting rid of unnecessary regulations, we are going to see America take off a boom that no one, I don't think, has imagined at this point. It's going to be tremendous. And when the United States does well, so does the rest of the world. So we are going to see, I believe, some really good things happening in the next 4 to 8 years, and hopefully even beyond that.
Oh, from your lips to God's ears, may that be true. Because, like I said, it is palatable, where you see people who are like, oh, Lord, Hillary Clinton going to get elected. I don't know what I'm going to do. And all of a sudden that shifted. It's like, oh, yes, there is hope. There will be change back to the Constitution. And, you know, I don't know how much you've been following the appointments that Trump has been putting forward. I've got a problem with this guy, Tillerson, as Secretary of State. Are you seeing any problems on that one? That's the only one I really, truly disagree with.
Well, I'll tell you why I don't at this point. And again, I must get more information. The reason why I don't is he, as CEO of ExxonMobil, what is his primary responsibility? His primary responsibility is to make sure that ExxonMobil makes a profit, that they are able to pay their shareholders dividends, and to increase the value of that company. Now, whether he does that talking to Putin in Russia, which has a lot of oil, or whether he does that talking to Venezuela, or any location where there's a lot of oil. Oh, and by the way, they have found a oil field in western Texas under shale that is larger than Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I heard that last week.
Utterly amazing.
Yeah, that is
utterly
great.
Amazing. So the fact that this gentleman, the CEO of Exxon, was talking with Putin, who's a horrible dictator. I mean, he's just as bad as Castro and the rest of them. The fact that he was talking to him to extend the profitability and the value to shareholders of his company, that's what he's supposed to do. I don't see a problem with that. And the fact that he was doing that in several places around the world, as I heard Donald Trump say, he has contacts everywhere. I think that's going to be a benefit. Now, do I think because he had that relationship with Putin that now all of a sudden we are going to warm up to Russia and start trading technology and everything else with him? No, I don't. Russia is still being run by a bunch of thugs. Russia is not our friend. They simply aren't. Neither is China. And we do a tremendous amount of trade and business with China, and they're not our friends either. So the fact that this gentleman had developed a relationship with Putin, I don't see that as a detriment. Candidly, I see it as a plus.
Well, I'm going to wait to see what the hearings come up with and do a little more. I that's the only appointment that I am leery with. And you mentioned the West Texas find underneath the shale. Which is fantastic. It came about at the same time when OPEC went to non-OPEC nations and convinced them to reduce their production to increase the price of oil. So now if we just tap our own supplies, not worried about international supplies, we can get the cost of manufacturing, the cost of everyday living down, way down. Because they're trying to push it up to $3 a gallon again. Come on. We're here in South Carolina. There are a lot of stations that are below $2 a gallon. So I know Florida is a little bit higher normally than we are. So it's a good thing when it's low.
Absolutely. For several reasons, Annie. Yeah, here in Florida is somewhere around $2.15 to $2.25 right now, which is a whole lot better than at one time it was $4.50 and above. And this is why, Annie, when fuel is that low, that means that people can now afford to look for work. And I will use my daughter as an example. She's a senior at University of West Florida now, and has her own vehicle. And I could notice, because we share our bank accounts are linked, I could see when she would go get gas. And when gas was very expensive, she was only putting in 10 $10 worth of gas, which would have been like 3 gallons. And I would say to her, Jessica, why are you only putting 3 gallons of gas in your car? She said, that's all I can afford. So now that gas has come down quite a bit, she's able to put in half a tank of gas, if not more, fill it up here and there. And so that is so important to those who are, I'll call them the working poor, or those who are looking for a job, to have an inexpensive source of fuel to be able to get to and from work and to look for a job. That mobility is so important, and that's what low fuel cost does for us. And not only to everyday Americans like that, but to our manufacturers, that to have the cost of energy to be low. That is tremendous, because it allows that manufacturer to shift that cost from energy to perhaps expanding what they're doing, research and development, hiring more people, lowering their prices. It's all good for America.
You know, it's funny because I've had this debate with a lot of people, because I asked them, you know, you want to increase the gas tax or you want to restrict oil exploration and drilling. Name me a single thing, except for the air you breathe, that is not produced or affected by a petrochemical. And those petrochemicals are coming directly out of that oil you don't want us to tap. Name me a single thing. Tell a woman to give up her lipstick. Tell your kid to give up your iPad or iPhone. Tell the kid they can't have the Xbox because these all contain petrochemicals. Go to the grocery store and look at the packaging and tell me where a petrochemical hasn't touched it, whether it's in the dye, in the container, in the equipment that processes the food. Tell me a single thing not affected or manufactured by a petrochemical, and no one can tell me a single item.
Excellent point, Annie. That is so true. Everywhere you look, you see it, from the plastics to whatever, our furniture, everything, our cars. That is such a valid point. And I would like to add this point while you're kind of on that subject, Annie, is that oil, gas, coal, and so forth are not, let me say again, are not fossil fuels. They do not come from squished animals and plants over a long period of time. They are abionic. In other words, it is a natural substance of the earth. And it was put there by God. He's given us the knowledge of how to use it for our benefit, but it did not come from squished dinosaurs and plants over millions of years. It doesn't even make sense. If that were the case, why is there so much oil underneath the North Sea, miles down? Why is there so much oil out in the Gulf, miles down? It doesn't make sense. So the fact that, and they try to say that if we burn this fuel and we release these carbons in the air that we're heating up our planet, that is also nonsense, a complete nonsense. I spent an hour debating Bill Nye the Science Guy on the silliness of what they call now climate change instead of global warming. As you say, Curtis, they change the language to fit their narrative. They have to call it climate change now, and it's that those substances were put there by God on this earth for our benefit, for our use. And as you say, Annie, man has discovered countless ways to use it for our benefit.
You know, what's funny is, because you're on the Gulf Coast, and I'm here on the eastern seaboard in South Carolina, but people don't realize that every single day the ocean floor releases globules of natural oil. These are not coming from wells. These are just seeping from the ocean floor. So the question is if you know it's seeping from that specific crack, why don't we tap it, contain it, and use it, and stop it from polluting the coastline? Whoops, sorry, I just knocked my microphone over. Oh, shit. Here we go.
You know, Annie, I don't believe it's a pollutant. And I'll tell you why. I remember when the terrible oil spill happened in the Gulf. What was that called again? The BP oil spill. Yeah, the BP oil spill, and I remember it hit the coastline here in Pensacola, and we have these white sand beaches. And it almost made your stomach turn when you saw those pictures of that oil on those beaches. And it's like, oh, no, not our beach, not our beach. But the thing is, after about a week to 10 days, it was gone. Couldn't see it on the beach, and we haven't seen it since. And as I was watching that whole incident going on, all of a sudden it dawned on me. It's like, wait a minute. When oil is concentrated like that and unrefined, it can be toxic to a lot of living animals and so forth. But when it is spread out parts per billion throughout the Gulf of Mexico and eventually over into the Atlantic, I believe what it does is it adds a coating to the fish to protect them from diseases and parasites. And I said, you watch, we are going to have an abundance of fish in the Gulf of Mexico in a number of years. And sure enough, we have. The red snapper, the grouper, it is thriving in the Gulf of Mexico right now. And I believe it is because, as you say, that oil is naturally seeping out in certain places. I think that's intended. God intended that. It's almost like a sunscreen or a lip balm for the fish as they swim through the ocean to protect them from diseases and parasites.
It's funny you mentioned the red snapper, because in the Gulf of Mexico, prior to all the drilling that's going on there now, the red snapper was almost extinct, almost completely gone. But once the drill rigs went in there, they became a natural reef. And the red snapper, the majority of red snapper we eat is coming from the Gulf of Mexico. You think that just one fish,
that's right,
but all the other natural fish that are coming in. And when we have those drill rigs out there, it becomes an ecotourism spot. It becomes a sportsman's fishing spot. It becomes a commercial fisherman's spot. And the other businesses that just benefit from those oil rigs out there is tremendous, because now you have demands for retail shopping, for restaurants, for hotels. You've got this tourism trade that can spread magnificently. And then you get all the other things. Now you'll need to have more police, more firefighters, but you've got the taxes, the additional tax revenues coming into the state. People don't understand the economic benefit that will go directly into their own pocket if we just let the drilling go.
Absolutely, Annie. You know, here in Florida, we have some beautiful beaches. And I can recall, and Senator Bill Nelson, one of our senators here in Florida, and I'm not sure where Marco Rubio's position is on it, has declared emphatically that we are not going to put oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico, particularly because it may, if there's a spill, it could destroy our beaches and affect tourism, which is a huge part of our economy. Well, two things about that. First of all, I believe the oil industry learned a very valuable lesson with that BP oil spill. And that lesson being, don't succumb to the tyranny of the routine. In other words, don't just get up every day and go through your checklist and check them off without actually making sure that what you're checking off is functioning properly. I think they learned that lesson. Nobody wants another BP oil spill. And so I think they will, it's become even safer now to drill out in the Gulf and everywhere else. The Chinese are doing it right off the coast of Cuba right now to be able to drill. And the second point I'd like to make is, even myself, when I first moved here to Florida in '85, I fell in love with the beaches. And the thought of an oil rig sitting out there to destroy that scenery, I said, no way, no, we're not going to have it. Last year, I was out in California. I was out in Palo Alto, California, and was staying at a hotel that was right along the Pacific Ocean. A beautiful hotel. They had it landscaped perfectly. I mean, it was very, very nice. And one morning, got up and went to the edge of the hotel. Across the street was the Pacific Ocean. So I walked across the street there, and they had a boardwalk. And I looked out, and I could see several oil rigs that were out there. And I will tell you that looking at those oil rigs did not in any way detract from the natural beauty that was there. I didn't look out and go, oh my goodness, look at that. It just destroyed everything. I can't stand to look at the ocean anymore. That was not the case. And in fact, over time, and I was only there for about 3 or 4 days, you stop seeing the oil rigs. You stop noticing them because they're a part of the landscape then. I think the same thing can happen in other parts along our coastline where we know oil and gas are. Some of the largest reserve of natural gas is in the Gulf of Mexico. And the thing is it's not so far out like the BP oil rigs where it's 5 miles down before you can hit it. It's much closer in, and which means you don't have to drill you don't have to go so far down before you get to it, which also means that if there is a spill, it can be contained a lot quicker.
Have you been listening to my shows? Because you're saying everything I have said.
Is that right?
Exactly.
Well, it's common sense, Andy, so that's why we would say the same thing.
One of the things that I wanted to point out was that I had heard a long time ago that one of the problems with the platform wells was the fact that the government regulated them to be in deep water, so deep that it was challenging technologically for these guys. Whereby if it was allowed more closer and shallower waters, it would be much more safer. But going back to what you were saying about your daughter not having the funds to fill her tank up, what the left seems to not get is that the more we get to keep our money, the more that goes into the economy, back into the economy. And they don't seem to understand it. They feel that the government is better at spending your money than you are. And I really think we should go back to a consumption tax, where we just pay taxes on what we purchase, like we did before 1909,
Yeah.
Before all this other stuff came in, income tax, payroll taxes and all that stuff.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, Curtis. And as you know, the income tax, when it was first instituted, it was only going to be on the rich. And it was only going to be, 3 or 5%, and no higher ever. Well, that's the same thing as saying if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. You can't believe a thing the government tells you. And so where are we now with our personal income tax? Way too high, much too high. And I agree, a consumption tax that would be 10% or less would be, again, another economic boom to the United States, the likes of which we can't even imagine right now.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the consumption tax because I'm a huge proponent of the fair tax, and we can do an entire show around just the fair tax issue. But we have a couple of comments in the chat room. I don't want to ignore you guys out there. Thank you for being with us. Bigfoot mentions that people who object to looking at oil rigs don't seem to have any problem with those huge wind turbines. And I will add on the ones that are known to kill wildlife and to cause mental issues because there's a hum that comes out of those wind turbines that is not something humans can handle very well.
Great point. That is such a good point. I was flying back from San Diego one time, and I think my connecting flight was going to be in Houston, and I was so amazed that as I was flying, we flew, I would say, a good 20 minutes to a half hour, where I saw windmill after windmill, utterly amazing, stretching across the landscape there. And as the chat room guy, Bigfoot, said, they seem to have no problem looking at those, but they don't want to look at an oil platform. Great point.
And a friend of ours, a friend of the show, she's got her own radio show out of Toronto, Canada. She said she's asking if you support the XL Keystone Pipeline because she's, as she says, a Canadian, and it's important to her.
Absolutely. In fact, when I was in the Florida House, I sponsored a resolution which passed both our House and Senate, and it was sent to President Obama, a resolution stating to open up and complete that XL pipeline. And I think we are going to see that done when Donald Trump gets into office. All the studies have been done by the EPA and all the various other departments and found nothing which could prevent that from happening, including no damage to our environment. And a lot of it had already been done. It was simply one section which needed to be completed. And I think we're going to see that get done. That's going to mean a lot to Canada. It's also going to mean even lower fuel costs here in the United States.
Yeah, it's amazing because I remember the brouhaha that went out over the Alaska pipeline, and they said it's going to inhibit the caribou migration and this and that. And as it turns out, because the pipeline gives off heat as it's there, the caribou happen to love it because it's something that is comfortable for them. They're finding that the wildlife along the route of the Alaska pipeline, instead of being shattered, has gone into abundance. And man, it's a hunter's paradise out there now.
Yes.
Mike, I got one last question for you.
Yes,
There's been six law enforcement officers killed in the state of Georgia just over the past 5 or 6 days. Would you support a bill that would make it a federal crime to murder a cop?
I would support a bill that would mean the death penalty if you murder a cop. I am all for capital punishment. I think that right now the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction, where we practically coddle these prisoners who are in prison, and instead it should be a place of discomfort. When you go to prison, you should not like being there at all. And to kill our police, then that is an attack on those who are trying to maintain our society, to stop it from falling to a state of anarchy. And so that is an attack on civilization itself, I believe. And if you are going to be so heinous as to want to attack what is holding our society together, then you have proven that you don't belong here with us. Now, once you appear before God, that's between you two. But you have already demonstrated that you can't stay here with us. And so it's time to go. I would support the death penalty for someone who intentionally murders a cop.
Oh, man. You know, being a retired cop, I waffle because as a Christian, I don't feel that man has the right to end another person's life. As a Christian, I deal with that. I've stood at too many funerals of fellow members, brothers in blue. Matter of fact, today's dedication was to a New York City police officer. So I have a hard time with the death penalty because I am pro-life, but I can understand the sentiment. When I went to the police academy back in '86, it was right about the time that Stephen McDonald was shot and paralyzed by a kid, and that had a long history of violence. But even he, I at that time, I couldn't understand why he was saying, no, forgive him. I don't want to see the death penalty. But as a Christian, I can understand that. I would rather see a stiffer penalty. And as you said, take away all these fancy privileges. No computer, no TV. Come on, these guys are getting 3 hots in a cot and they're having a field day. If you look at some of these prisons, they're better than certain hotels. Come on, it's got to stop.
That's right.
Don't mollycoddle them, make them
Annie,
pay.
That's right. And Annie, I'm a Christian also. And the reason why I would believe in the death penalty is, of course, one of the 10 Commandments is, thou shalt not kill. But if you look at the original language, it says, thou shalt not murder. That's a big difference between thou shalt not kill. And there were many times in the Old Testament, in the book of Deuteronomy, as Moses was laying out the law, that the death penalty was mandated for certain actions, including, get this, dishonoring your parents. It said to stone them to death. Now, of course, we don't go that far, but as a Christian, I can come to grips with there are certain individuals which have demonstrated that they cannot or do not want to be a part of our society. So, okay, we're going to give you the opportunity to stand before God and let Him make your final decision. But you're not going to stay here with us anymore.
We will arrange the meeting.
That's right.
You see, because Christ said that, government has their laws, you should obey them. So if the government decides the death penalty for heinous crimes, I understand that. Just me personally, I can't sit there on a jury and give someone a death penalty because it would bother me. It just simply is something in my soul I can't do. But if there is a jury and by law they follow the law, I'm not going to complain, honestly. And this really gets me also because the people that are pro-choice will not support the death penalty. So tell me where the hypocrisy is in that. You will want to kill an innocent baby, but someone who created such a heinous crime that their life is now forfeit, no, you're going to protect that life, but not the innocent child. Unbelievable.
Right. Only a liberal.
Oh, man. Now, what do you plan for your future? You're running your business, and how, if people want to contact you and talk with you or whatever, how can they get a hold of you?
Oh, probably one of the easier ways is through Twitter. It's at Mike Hill FL, as in Florida, at Mike Hill FL. That's a good way to get in touch with me. Or they can look me up on Facebook. There are several Mike Hills. So you have to find the one that has a picture of a real good-looking guy, and that's me.
Oh, man. Well, we're waiting for our second guest to call in. So, Mike, if you want to hang around with us, because I know, Curtis, there's other questions you haven't asked, so shoot at it, honey.
Yeah. When it comes to Trump, and he takes office in January, do you think he will strike down many of the Obama's, I'm getting a mind blockage here.
Executive orders?
Executive orders, yeah. You think he will go about doing that on the first day?
He said he would, and I hope he stands true to that, because there are so many illegal, unconstitutional executive orders that Obama had issued that I hope he is going to repeal. He said he would. He said on day one, it's gone. And that would be so refreshing to see someone who campaigned on a promise to actually do it. And I believe Trump will. I'd like to see him do that. I'd like to see him repeal Obamacare. He said he would.
You have reached the voicemail box of 30578833476. At the tone, please record your voice message. When you are finished recording, you may hang up or press pound for more options.
Yeah, hi, Doug. This is Ann Ubelis with Southern Sense Talk Radio. We're on the air live. I've been trying to reach you to bring you in for your interview. If you can, call us at area code 917-889-3675. Thank you.
The Chinese economy, of how great it is and it's a boom and all that, it is not. The Chinese economy is so dependent on the United States because of our purchasing power here. And if we went, and I would just go out on a limb and say, if we went 1 week without buying Chinese products, their economy would collapse. They need the United States purchasing power in order for them to continue what they're doing. And so we see where capitalism is allowed to thrive, let's say Hong Kong, let's say South Korea, as opposed to North Korea, the United States. We see when capitalism is allowed to thrive that the people prosper. And where socialism is put in place, that the people suffer. We have empirical evidence of that now.
I'm back. I'm sorry, Beth.
Okay, I got another question for you. You're prior military. I'm prior military. How do you believe President Trump can bring back the morale and the might of our military versus what it is now and what it has become, you know?
Oh, I think he's going to do a tremendous amount there. And I think where we saw some evidence of that, Curtis, was last week in the Army-Navy football game when Donald Trump made an appearance there of how the crowd erupted, that the midshipmen and the cadets gave him a big, huge cheer. It's like they are so hungry for good leadership, as opposed to what we've had in the past 8 years, this nonsense of leading from behind. That is not the United States. We are the world's leaders, undeniably. And like Obama went to the Coast Guard Academy and told them it's a dereliction of duty if you don't fight global warming. How ridiculous is that? Nobody wants a commander-in-chief like that. They want a commander-in-chief who will appoint people like General Mattis. And as I understand it, he's already appointed 3 Marine generals to high positions in his cabinet. And we all know what the Marines are about. They don't play around. They mean serious business. So I think that alone has already started to increase the morale of our military, to get rid of using our military with the social engineering, with the LGBT agenda, with women in fighting combat positions, all that kind of nonsense. I think you're going to see that change with Donald Trump, and you're going to see this military force, which is the strongest military the world has ever seen. They've proven themselves. You're going to see even more of our young men and women, mighty people of valor, volunteering to be a part of that, more so than we've seen even in the past, which is in and of itself, Curtis, amazing that the strongest military force the world has ever seen is made up of volunteers, not conscripts. They are volunteers. Utterly amazing. And we have, I'm just so proud of those young men and women. I have a son right now who's in the Marines and is returning home now from a deployment, was just in a ship just off the coast of Libya. And he and his battalion are returning home. They'll be home on the 20th of December, and I can't wait to go see him. So proud of him and all those who serve.
Wow, because I'm right here in the heart of the Tri-Command.
It's been tough on them, especially with the rules of engagement they've been operating under.
Right. Like you can't shoot unless you're shot at first or something retarded like that. It's crazy. When you have a commander-in-chief who's probably never in his life gotten even into a fist fight, much less anyway, this man does not understand might. And I think Donald Trump does, and that's why he has selected those retired Marine generals to be a part of his cabinet and Secretary of Defense. And we are going to see a mighty U.S. military again in all branches. As you know, Curtis, has been decimated in terms of the funding which was given to it and the size. We're at our smallest size in a long period of time. I mean, even before World War II, we've decimated it, and we're going to see that grow. That's going to mean an economic boom to a lot of those who make who supply our military needs. Good things are in store for America.
It is, because like I said, I'm in the heart of the Tri-Command. I've got the Parris Island Marine Corps Recruit Depot just a couple of miles one direction. I've got the Marine Corps Air Station in another direction, and smack in the middle, we've got the Naval Hospital. And I could see with the men and women in these communities how much more excited they are with Trump coming in, because they know that they're going to support the military. They know the social experiments are going to start to trickle out. No more of these social experiments. The military is there for one purpose and one purpose only: to break things, guys. You're training them to break things. They are not there to hold someone's hand because they're having a gender crisis or whatever it is. Bring the chaplains back. Let them practice their religion openly and uninhibited. You know, these stupid things. You had one Marine was telling me that, he was reprimanded because he was reading a conservative book. The kid was a conservative, and someone objected to what he was reading quietly on his own. Really? It's got to stop. Got to stop. Holy cow. Man, it's
well, you bring up a good point, Annie, in that we have seen an attack on religious freedom in America, and in particular on Christianity. And I think now that Donald Trump has come in, we're going to see those constitutional freedoms restored to where we can, again, publicly profess our faith as a business owner, can make decisions based on our faith and not have to face fines and jail time and retribution for that. I think those days are behind us now.
Well, hopefully, because people always misinterpret the First Amendment, where it says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment. I keep on hitting my mic. Establishment of religion. And they leave out this part, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. In other words, if I want to freely exercise my religious freedom, and it is against my religion to have you come into my church and force us to perform your marriage, you're actually violating the First Amendment. So for those people that will not bake the cake for that couple, you're violating their First Amendment right of freedom of religion, because now you're prohibiting them from exercising this. And this is what the left wants you to forget about. Oh my goodness, you cannot pray over your meal. That little girl that was about 6 or 7 years old saying a quiet prayer over a meal gets chewed out by the cafe monitor because she's praying before she eats. It's crazy. It is crazy out there. Crazy. But we've got to...
ridiculous.
Yeah, we have to be like Chick-fil-A and enforce that part of the amendment everyone wants to forget about. Because if you prohibit my practice of religion, you are violating my constitutional rights. I wish more people would sue them. Yeah.
Well, I got a question for Mike. I got one question for you. We have several states where it seems as though the federal government owns like anywhere from 75 to 85% of that state. Do you see a need for the federal government to own land like that, property like that in the United States?
No. and they have no constitutional authority to do so. Nowhere in the Constitution does it give the federal government the right to take land or even to purchase land. Particularly out in the western states is where you see it the most, but even here in Florida, 37% of the land is either state or federal, which is huge. That is way too much for a number of reasons. Number one, when it is in private property hands, then it can generate income, whether it's being used in a business or a tax base or whatever. It generates income. It does not when it is owned by government. Secondly, when you have private property rights, you will see that it is better maintained by those who own that property, because they see the value in it and potentially perhaps selling it one day, than the government, who only wants to keep it off of private property hands. If we can, and this is going to sound kind of radical, if we can go to privatizing our lakes, our rivers, and even parts of our oceans, can you imagine what some entrepreneur would come up with if they were able to own a part of the Mississippi River? If we can privatize our national highway system, can you imagine what it would look like knowing that it was owned privately? They want you to continue using it. They want you to use the businesses along the way. What it would look like. And I think the more we can privatize what the government has in their hands right now, the better for the United States.
Well, I agree with sending a lot of these lands and everything back to the private hands or to the states themselves, because Wyoming and Utah have been battling for, oh, good Lord, ever since Teddy Roosevelt started this stupid system of government owning land. But they've been trying to get their land back because they know it will generate more revenue for the state as well as for the federal government. The only thing I would have with highways, instead of having an individual own them, revert it to the state or the local community. Because my fear would be every time you cross over from one jurisdiction to the next, you're going to see nothing but toll booths. Because you've got the turnpike down there in Florida, and my husband and I, whenever we traveled, stayed off of it because we didn't want to hit all those stupid toll booths.
Now that's the truth. That's the truth. But now those are government toll booths right now that you see.
Imagine if it was private ownership then.
Well, if it were private ownership, competition would see that either it would be kept very low or maybe even non-existent. If you look at now our long-distance phone calling, it is so inexpensive right now to make a long-distance phone call when, 20, 30 years ago, it was very expensive to do that. But through competition, technology, and ingenuity, we can make long-distance phone calls, and as we have been doing now, talk for over an hour, and it is not that expensive at all.
No. For me,
Like,
I've got it free on my phone.
Do you think that private prisons failed? That's what I hear. There was a lot of talk about privatizing prisons. They did it, but of lately I've heard that they failed. If that's true, why do you think it failed?
Well, the reason why and we had them here in Florida. One reason why they were failing is because even though the prisons were privatized, they weren't taking care of all the needs of that prison. For example, if a prisoner was sick, they sent them to a state or federal prison to receive their care. And they found that the training of the guards was not as strenuous or as effective as it was with the state and federal prisons. And so they found that there were more disturbances that were happening in these private prisons, that the security wasn't as good as in the state-owned prisons. And so that's why they began failing in Florida. And it was also because they found it wasn't profitable because of the health care costs, which had to be taken care of, and that's why they started sending them to the state-owned prisons, the prisoners. They just couldn't afford it.
Yeah, it's a shame because it had such potential, but then again, you're there to make a profit, so you're going to cut corners here and there wherever you can until something unfortunate happens, like someone escapes, which is what you don't want to have happen. But I think if there was, I don't know, what would you say? Would it be regulated, inspected, or I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that would be.
I think there's still potential for it. It was tried here in Florida, and the pushback on it was we should not be making a profit over incarcerating somebody, locking somebody up. You should not be making a profit on that. I don't see why not. If it's effective, and the whole goal being taking a criminal off the streets and putting them behind bars so that the streets are safer, whether a profit's being made or not. Why not? There are costs associated with it when the government's doing it. So let's take that burden off of the taxpayers. And it was tried here. I think it should be tried again. You learn from prior mistakes. You learn from things that didn't work and didn't work properly, and fix them. And as you say, Annie, some form of regulation to make sure that they are meeting certain requirements, I think would be effective. But you have the danger of over-regulating that industry, like government has a tendency to do everywhere else, which makes it harder to earn that profit.
Like Ronald Reagan said, I'm from the government, I'm here to help you. That's the biggest lie.
That's right.
But I want to change the subject just a little bit, because there's this whole thing everyone's talking about, the fake news. And what gets me is that fake news has existed since the beginning of man's speech, when the first housewife leaned over the fence and had gossip with the other neighbor. They're trying to regulate, once again, the First Amendment, our freedom of speech. What would you say about the fake news? Just leave it alone?
Well, yes, Annie, I think fake news is going to die on its own. Because it is a falsehood, and it'll go away. And as you say, it's always been here. It's nothing new. It's just that now there are other sources which can point out when it is fake, and so they're being called out at this point. No one believes anymore what CNN, MSNBC, and the rest of them just say. They're now taking with a grain of salt. And even when they hear something, most people of intelligence will go and do some research on their own to see if it is indeed valid, instead of just taking it at their word. I think those days are gone until they can restore their own credibility, and it will be up to them to do that, restoring their own credibility by simply reporting the truth, reporting what happened without your opinion thrown in there, and let people make up their own mind.
Yeah,
I was just wondering if you heard the recent news about CNN and some of its employees, black employees, complaining that there's racism and discrimination at CNN. I didn't hear a whole lot about that from the alphabet, news channels. Have you heard of this lawsuit?
I have not heard of that lawsuit. I'll have to look into that. Until you just mentioned it, Curtis, I had not heard that before. So,
you should be able to Google it. Black employees at CNN filed discrimination lawsuit. See, they kept it quiet.
They sure did. I hadn't heard that.
It's
I'm not.
It's funny because, I'm up on Facebook and everywhere else, like you are. And I'm constantly getting people sending me stuff, spread this prayer, this poem, or whatever. This is attributed to this child, and no one is doing their research. So you got fake news can be coming at you from anywhere and everywhere. And I usually turn around and I'll do a fact check and then say, hey, listen, guy, you're sending me this thing. You're claiming it's a poem written by a 7-year-old little girl that's suffering from cancer. Wrong. It's written by this professor. It's up on his website, right? And I end up sending them the actual facts. And I think it's because we've become so lazy. If it doesn't go in 140 characters or less, if it takes more than 30 seconds, no one's going to pay attention or do their homework. So I think it's on the individual. It's on the individual, and government shouldn't interfere.
Indeed. I agree. Annie, Curtis, I'm going to have to go in about 4 minutes. It'll be 2:30 my time here, and I have to prepare for an appointment that I have coming into my office. And I'll be glad to stay on this for a bit longer, but I do have to go.
Well, it has been...
See, we like you so much. We didn't want you to go.
Well, it has been a pleasure.
I always absolutely. I always enjoy being on your show. Please have me back anytime. The discussion is always good. It's invigorating. It's liberating. I love your show and what you are doing.
Oh, thank you so much. It has been our pleasure. And just pick up the phone, call Curtis or me, and we'll get you back on. And I'm wishing you good luck in your career for now, and hope to see you run again for office soon. Maybe even for the U.S. Senate. How's that sound?
Oh, my. No, yeah, I thought you liked me, Annie. I don't want to go to Washington, D.C.
Well, then
we need you there.
You could actually move here to South Carolina and run against Lindsey Graham. Please.
Oh, my.
Well, Mike, if I don't speak to you, have a very Merry and blessed Christmas.
Amen. Thank you. Merry Christmas to you, too, and to all your listeners.
Oh, thank you so much. All right. Mike Hill, check him out up on Twitter, Mike Hill FL, also up on Facebook. He's got several different locations up on Facebook. Check him out, friend him, and send him messages. He's a lot of fun. Curtis, you have some of the best friends around here. You know that?
I do, and I appreciate them. And that includes you and Kel and all the rest of the guys in the chat room and our listeners. Well, and I'll be in touch with you, Mike.
Well, I don't know what happened to our other guest. We were supposed to have been joined with Doug Giles from the Clash Daily. There seems to be like a little something didn't come through because I tried reaching him on both his numbers. Yeah, so unfortunate. We'll see if we can rebook him for a later date. But I got tons of stuff here to talk about. Here, I mentioned this, Chris, before you became co-host. This happened a couple of years back. Was 2 years back, actually, that this kid, Charles Clark, was waiting for a flight at Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky Airport, and officers from the Drug Enforcement Task Force and the police department ended up seizing all of the cash he was carrying. He was traveling home, and he had all the cash there because he was given gifts and loans from family, friends, and so forth to pay for his college tuition. So he had this money on him. And the ticket agent or whoever was checking him in at the airport claimed they smelt pot on him. So, of course, now security comes in and they confiscate $11,000 off of him. That was his college tuition. And now, finally, it looks like the court has ordered them to return it with interest. There is a problem. Ever since the federal government came up with this assets forfeiture law, unfortunately, various police departments have been abusing that. And innocent people are getting caught up in it. And luckily, this kid took him 2 years. I'm sure almost all of that $11,000 to get the money back. But the court has sided with them. And, who knows? Someone probably pulled their stash of cash out and gave to the kid. And that's maybe where the smell of pot came from. Because it seems the kid was clean. Yeah. He wasn't dealing. He wasn't selling. He wasn't transporting. And it took the courts 2.5, because it's happened in February of 2014, and only just recently the court ordered the money returned.
Yeah, I think that's un-American. I think you should be able to travel with as much money as you want to, as long as it's legally yours. It should be nobody else's business. If you want to carry a briefcase with $100,000, you should be able to do that. We don't live in a closed society,
Right.
We enjoy our independence and freedom. And if you haven't committed a crime and you're not suspected of committing a crime, you should be able to flow, back and forth, with money, and any denomination. And I get tired of going into stores that say we don't accept anything more than $50, because that money on it says legal tender for all bills and, whatever else it says. And I think they deny us our rights.
It's funny.
Use money as it was intended to be used.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because when Hurricane Matthew came through here, I went to put gas in my car, and had the gas cans with me so I can get the generator to continue to run. And everywhere I went, I had cash on me. And my stepson was with me, and he had cash on himself. And everywhere we went, no one was taking cash. They all said you've got to use a credit card or a debit card. Tell me why I have to pay using a card when I have cash on hand. And they said, well, because the power is down. If anyone knows cash registers, there is a manual way to open that cash drawer. And if you know how to add and subtract, it was unbelievable. We wanted to put $50 worth of gas in the cans in my car. $50. We had the $50. I said, here's the cash. You don't have to make change, just the whole cash. Nope. You got to use a credit card. Since when did cash become a dirty word? Gene Shepherd used to say, in God we trust, all of us pay cash. But now it's like, in everyone else we trust, and God has to pay with a credit card. It's become backwards.
The same time that capitalism and profit became bad words. It's all part of an agenda to delegitimize our way of life.
Well, Ron in the chat room, he's a clown. I love him. He said he's starting a fake news daily. We report, you decide. And now, also, he said, by using the card, and this is true, this is honestly true, they can track your purchases. Now, I've talked about this in the past, and I haven't spoken about it lately, but if you ever use those little membership cards or whatever, they know exactly where you were, what you purchased, and what your preferences are based upon that. Now, there was a couple of court cases, I think this was about maybe 20 years ago, with those membership cards, where a woman was in the grocery store, the floor was wet, she slipped, and I believe she had broken her leg or something like that. And she's suing the store, for the not marking the floor as being wet, causing her to slip and injure herself. You'd think it would be a perfectly reasonable lawsuit. Well, what the store did was, well, madam, on the day before you picked up a beer or you had bought some wine or whatever she bought, we think you were drunk when you fell. We don't believe there was water on the floor. We think you were drunk because of what you purchased prior. You got to be careful, folks. When you use those membership cards, if you pick up something that you really don't want other people to know that you're purchasing, like that X-rated magazine, do not use your card. Do not use those membership cards. Do not use your debit card or your credit card. Pay cash. Otherwise, if anything happens, God forbid, all they have to do is pick up the history of your purchases, see where you were, and track where you were, and then you're in trouble. Believe it or not, everything can be traced back. Every single person in the United States of America has an electronic footprint. Which brings me now to a divergent subject, which is probably dear to the heart of Vito and Sasquatch and Ron out there. The refugees coming to the United States, there are no electronic fingerprints. We don't know where they're coming from, if they are truly from the location they claim to be, if their names are actually what they are. We have no way to vet them, but we can vet ourselves better. That crazy?
And more and more are coming in before this election. The inauguration. He's bringing in as many as he can. And it's got to be a way Congress can stop this.
Yeah, cut off funding. Cut off funding to these sanctuary cities.
The majority. We still hold the majority, but they still act like they're in the minority.
Exactly. We've got to get our congressmen and women out there to grow a pair. You hear us out there, people?
I'm telling you.
We're telling you now, grow a pair. You know, we've had one after another of terrorist attacks within our own borders. We've got an investigation going on in each and every state and territory here in the United States. We have these terrorist investigations, and still no one's listening to what Donald Trump said. Stop the refugees, stop the immigration until we can verify who these people are. You know, for crying out loud, my husband's family spent 2 years in a displaced persons camp in Germany after World War II, waiting to come to the United States. And back then, there had to be someone who vouched for them and sponsored them. They had to have a place to live. They had to have a job lined up. They could not be on any government assistance for 5 years, for the first 5 years they're here, and they have to swear to become American citizens. We don't demand that anymore, even though those laws are still on the books. We've got to get to have those laws enforced.
Yeah, that is something that they get to pick and choose what laws they want to enforce and not enforce, like a dictatorship.
Yeah, it's crazy. It absolutely is crazy. And we were talking about veterans, and this happened, oh good Lord, November 8th, the court made a ruling overturning this decision, enforcing the Fourth Amendment. Iraq War veteran First Sergeant Matthew Corrigan pursued his claim for monetary damages against the District of Columbia and certain individual police officers after these officers violated his Fourth Amendment. What they did was they ransacked his house not once but twice. Now, he was an Army reservist, and he was suffering from PTSD. And he had been training soldiers in Fallujah between 2005 and 2006. And following his tour home, he came back to his apartment, which is in the quiet corner of D.C., and in February of 2010, he intended to place a call to his home helpline. He was having a PTSD attack, and he just wanted to talk to someone to help him through it. He accidentally dialed the national number, not the local number. And when he got the person on the other end of the phone on the national health line, and the volunteer responded to his conversation with them, asking if Corrigan had owned any guns. And Corrigan says, yeah, I own guns. Then the person on the other end of the phone said, put the gun down. In the first place, he never had them in his hand. He was sitting on the telephone talking to a help hotline. And then the volunteer asked Corrigan if he intended to hurt himself or anyone else. And Corrigan said no. And after he realized he was not getting the help he needed from this individual, how much you want to bet they were a Hillary Clinton supporter, he hung up the phone. And the next thing he knows, his house is surrounded. It's at 4 a.m. People in the neighboring homes were evacuated and barricaded. They blocked off the street. They shut off the gas to his house. And then moved in on him. Moved in on him. And when they ring the front doorbell, he answers the front door and he steps outside. Now he's no longer within his house. He's no longer within reach of his guns. He's got a dog. He's got a therapy dog. And he closes the door to talk to the police. When he realized the police wanted to take him over to the psych ward to have him evaluated, he locked his front door and stepped away. And when the police officer asked him for the key to the house, he says, no, I'm not authorizing you to go in and search my home. You can take me over to the hospital. I want to go to the hospital, no problem, but you cannot enter my home. You know what they did? They said, well, we're going to have to break down the door. And he said, well, then I guess you're going to have to break down the door. I am not giving you permission to enter my home. They broke down the door. They couldn't find anything in there. And then, while he's at the hospital getting treatment, they go back a second time without a warrant and ransacked the house, turned up all the doors, turned everything on the floor, emptied out all the cabinets, trashed his house. Now, folks, you know I'm a retired cop. This is just not right. This is not right. There is no reason for this to have gone on. And fortunately, the court said the same thing. And the court said the police did not obtain a warrant either time and broke in without permission. And they demanded they pay restitution to this veteran. Isn't that crazy? This is what they're doing.
You would have thought they would have learned that in police training 101. You need a warrant.
Now
And I guess it doesn't matter. In this case, it doesn't matter.
Now, whoever was the commanding officer is an idiot. And for the officers to go against the law, knowingly break the law, without obtaining a warrant, those are not good cops. I'm sorry. And that really disgusts me because they give the rest of us a bad name. That's just not right.
Well, like you said, there are cops out there who are bad cops, but I still think it's under 2%. And when it comes to, cops being accused of killing blacks and other minorities, I still believe it's under 2%. But the focus is never on the 90% black-on-black crime, and I think that's Italian saying "infamia,"
What's also worse is that,
doesn't make sense.
like this article that I pulled up, which was where was this on? The Daily Signal. This was up on the Daily Signal, December 5th of this month. It's titled "Key Decision: D.C. Court Upholds Fourth Amendment." If anyone wants to take a look at it, but these articles end up, going through front page, and yet all the good out there that first responders do is never talked about because it's not sexy, it's not exciting, unless someone does something.
Only 2% that are bad. The rotten apples, they get all the news, play, unless it's black on black crime. Those 90% never get no airtime.
No. And also, I blame it on the education system. What's coming up, parents are not doing this, and the education system is not doing that, is showing respect for the law, showing respect for property, and showing respect for your fellow human being. And this is where we are falling behind because we're losing our moral compass. And unless we bring it back, unless we have it restored, we will go the way of the dodo bird. People like you and me, people like Kel.
And you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People like Vito, Mama Mia no Sharia, who did I miss? Oh, Sasquatch, my friend, and Rock and Ron out there. Oh, man. Here's another article I pulled up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this again goes to the type
We
of...
are losing our moral compass.
Yeah.
I think ever since they removed prayer from school, we lost the moral,
Well, when they started having people sit down during the Pledge of Allegiance, that too, used to be able to say the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, fine. If you want to stand and not say it while the rest of the class does, that's fine. That's your prerogative. But don't sit down. Don't respect the nation that is housing you, the nation that is educating you, the nation that's probably also feeding you. Don't disrespect. There's no nation in the history of man like ours. The closest you can come to it is Israel. No nation that gives you the liberties, the rights, the freedoms, and the protections. None. And yet we're constantly being criticized. Here, this was a professor from SUNY, which is the State University of New York. And this is from upstate. The professor is Anthony J. Macula. And as a matter of fact, I saw him on Fox News. Oh, good Lord. I love Tucker Carlson. And he has a way of just going for the jugular. And what this professor did, he sent out an email to 600 fellow faculty and staff members at SUNY. And he asked, do you believe in white power and supremacy of the white race? He asks that. And then the second question he asks, do you believe that a multi-ethnic and a multicultural democracy can succeed? Now, here you are using a university's email system to preach politics to your fellow staff. I thought you were there to teach the children and not campaign. But yet he's making it sound like those of us that voted for Donald Trump are racist, white supremacists. Again, the false narrative. And it's being spread on university campuses. You know, really, it's gotten out of hand, guys. We've got to take back our education system. Oh, man.
Yeah, I think we need some safe zones from these idiots.
And we've got about 13 minutes left on the clock, and the phone lines are open if anyone wants to call in and join the conversation. Oh, please do. You know, if you want to talk about putting Christ back in Christmas or something like that, you know, dial in. We'll talk with you as we fill up the last 13 minutes left on the show.
Well, I wanted to mention that I've been watching some of the TV shows out today, and I look at the male characters, and all of them seem to be kind of wimpy or girly type men. And when I think back on what I grew up with, you know, people like Marvin, you know, Lee Marvin and Clint Eastwood and Charleston Heston, and even pioneers like John Glenn, you know, we don't seem to have that kind of image on media anymore.
Well, you know, this is funny you mentioned that because it's part of the notes I have scribbled on here. GNC, which is the health food store, has a great commercial out there. I swear I was rolling on the floor laughing. It's for a product that's supposed to boost a man's testosterone. And it shows a picture of this lumberjack out there, and he's obviously the picture's probably from the 30s or 40s or whatever, but they're saying men today don't have as much testosterone as their father did. And our fathers did not have as much testosterone as their father did. And they're hawking this thing for testosterone, trying to get the men to man up. And they have this one guy lying there in the salon. He's got a comfortable fuzzy robe on. He's got cotton between all of his toes as he's getting a pedicure. He's got this cucumber mask on his face. His head is wrapped up in this towel as they're talking about putting testosterone back in men. It's true. The men today are so effeminate. It's amazing we're able to produce children at this point in time. Because if they don't got any huevos. It was just hysterical. And the fact that they had that commercial out there, I thought was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Oh, man.
Well, I miss the old days. I really do. You know, those guys were great back then. Steve Reeves and all that crew.
Well, also, I don't know how many people out there use Amazon, and I use Amazon a lot, honestly. You know, I like the website, but I turned around and I saw another commercial that is out there, and you see a imam, a Muslim imam, and in the next frame you see a Catholic priest. And the way they did this commercial, it was about purchasing items on Amazon. And they were equating the Catholic faith on the same level as Islam. You know, they show the priest kneeling to pray. And then next thing you know, you see a mosque with the imam kneeling to pray. I'm sorry. I would not put Islam on the same plateau as Christianity, but that is what they were trying to do by saying that they're equal, they're same, they're praying to the same God. No, we are not praying to the same God. The God of Christianity is surely not the God that Muhammad had concocted. I'm sorry, it's a false narrative.
And I've seen that commercial.
Yep.
And I felt the same way. You know, this is another propaganda ploy.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I'm reading the chat room. Oh, yeah. Huevos Rancheros Mucho Grande. Okay, thanks, Ron. Oh, man. Well, we're just filling up the last 10 minutes of the show. And it's unfortunately we lost our guest Doug Giles. I'll just have to find out what happened with him and try to rebook him. And here's another one. Oh, here we go. Kel would probably be aware of this one out there. Kel, call in and let me know if you know about this story, because it comes from a politically correct neighborhood to the north, meaning Canada. It seems like the Canuck government believes allowing a woman to defend themselves against physical and sexual violence would further gender inequality. Canada doesn't just deny citizens a right to firearms, it also prohibits them even basic tools for self-defense. Pepper spray is among the illegal items that can get you into trouble. In fact, defending yourself with pepper spray may save you from being raped, but you'll end up serving up to 3 years in prison and paying a $500,000 fine. This is crazy. This is crazy. So, Kel, dial in and talk to us about this. So, they aren't allowed to carry pepper spray, but aren't Canadians really polite? Really? This is...
It is ridiculous. I tell you, that everybody should have a right to defend themselves by any means necessary.
Well, there is one Canadian member of Parliament that's trying to change the law to allow women the tools to defend their own bodies. And the person is the name of Katie Lech, and she's been a Canadian MP since 2011, and formerly the Minister of Labour and Minister of Status of Women. She's also a pediatric orthopedic surgeon and is running to head the Conservative Party in Canada. And on December 1st, she announced her plan to improve public safety in Canada by empowering Canadians to defend themselves from criminal acts. So, hooray for that. A little sanity, probably. A little sanity.
Well, I guess we're going to have to take up karate, judo, or jiu-jitsu, or kung fu, or something up there. Is that legal? I wonder.
Yeah, but it's crazy.
Is that acceptable?
By fighting against a rapist, you're creating a gender inequality. Well, what about the protection of my gender and myself? What about my safety? What about the safety of my daughter, my sister, my mother, or your sister, mother, daughter, neighbor? So, simply because you're female, you have to allow a man to do to you whatever they feel like, and you cannot defend yourself? Really? That's outrageous.
Annie, do you guys have open carry in South Carolina like they do in Pennsylvania and Florida?
No, and we're working on that. We did have a bill that went up before the state legislature. I believe it was a year and a half ago, and unfortunately it got shot down.
Wow.
And matter of fact, just before it went to vote...
No pun intended.
Yeah, just before it went to vote, a friend of mine who happens to be a state senator, Tom Davis, and he's an excellent guy. He works really hard for us out there. He was at my Tea Party meeting just before that, and he looked at me and he said, well, because of the way that women's clothing is made, it's very difficult to do a concealed weapon. Unless you're wearing something really bulky that you can hide it under, or you leave it in your purse, which is something I do not recommend anyone do. Always have it on your person within easy reach. And practice drawing it. Practice. But he's saying, well, where can a woman conceal a firearm? And he's looking at me, and I said, guess. But it is true.
Doesn't he watch movies? James Bond women.
I can't understand how they're able to hide those guns on them, because you look at them, they're form-fitting and everything else, and there's not a single place where that bulge would not stand out. Unless their weapon is paper thin. Really. Just don't believe the movies. It just does not happen that way, guys. Oh, man. But
women can be creative.
But we can be creative in finding ways. It's just a matter of doing it where it's not obvious. But I wish we would have an open carry, because that would keep someone at a far enough distance going, hey, I'm not going to go pick on that lady. No, she's strapping. There's no friggin' way I'm going near her. And unfortunately, it often is those of us that are disabled, handicapped, or whatever, that become the easy target and prey. But imagine how much more we can defend ourselves if we are allowed an open carry. So it's a real issue.
That's true.
It is a real issue. We're down to our last 4.5 minutes, Curtis. So the show has gone fast. We've had a lot of fun. And we're going to be back next week.
Yeah, one guy.
Yep. Jerome Kersey. He's got this little Christmas thing out there that is hysterical. So we're going to have Jerome Kersey back on. I haven't had him on. I think the last time I had him on was back 2 years ago. He's got great books out there, too. We'll be talking about that. And there's an artist who has some great patriotic songs. His name is Richard Lynch. I got a funny feeling we had him on last year also when we did those 5 different musicians that one day. Everyone did a little bit of their music.
Yeah.
But he asked to come back on because he's got a new release he wants to talk about. So we got great guests coming up next Friday. And then we're going to have Kel and Tim Burton on next week. He's got stuff that is going on that he's going to join us. And Hunter Avalon will be on the following Friday. He has a YouTube video out there. As a matter of fact, he's got a bunch of them. He's a young kid. He's like, I don't know, 20-something, really young. He's one of the millennials, and he has some hysterical and great videos up on YouTube that criticizes the millennial generation as being wussified and extremely liberal and intolerant and everything else. He goes after his own generation, tooth and nail. Matter of fact, Sue from New Mexico is the one that put me in his direction. I spoke to him on the phone. He's a really good, great kid. So we'll have fun with him. And we have our fingers crossed, possibly on the 24th. I'm waiting for confirmation on this by his scheduler, Colonel Alan West will be hopefully joining us right after Christmas. So I'm just going to lock down the date with him.
Right.
Yeah, so we've got great things going on, and that's all the show we got for today. Now, if I can just find my closing music. Oh, I can't find my closing music. Oh, well. I know you don't want to hear the Dirty Uncles again, so we won't play that with you. Just let me find something that we can end the show with. Oh, here it is. Here's my closer. Found it. All right. We see everyone here back on Friday. Same bat time, same bat station. I say good night and God bless. Thank you, Curtis. And here we go.
All right.
If you find yourself in trouble, count on
90
me,
seconds.
My friend. I'll get right up in trouble. You've been listening to Southern Sense Blog Talk Radio. Producer and your hostess extraordinaire is Ann Ubelis. The theme music, American Stand Up, is written and performed by Don Fortney. For more from Don, check out his webpage, teapartymusic.webs.com.
60 seconds.
Southern Sense is a proud member of Ghost Fighter Radio and Freedom Media Network. Southern Sense is common sense. Take it out, Don. American. Well, look me
10 seconds.
in the eye. Tell me what you see. I'll tell the truth every time. Yes, you can count on me. I've got the backbone. American. I've got the heart. American. I've got the will.